Good. So we're good here? Boy, I have never wanted to be in your shoes. I grew up in the dealership space. And I tell you, for the last 20 years, or almost 2 decades right there, I've had a very safe haven, a very good role within Cox Automotive. And I tell you what, they treated me so well over the years. But we're actually at a point right now, very unique tipping point in our industry. And I'm really glad to be right here where we are right now, because things are about to change. And one of the things you notice different from this conference, from any other conference you've been to so far, is the players here are different. And what does that sign mean? It means things are about to change because outside influence is coming in. So Christian actually is just one of those outside influences. And I want to tee up a few slides to begin, before he begins his talk about people-based strategies. First, a little quick intro about yourself right there.
Yeah, where do I fit in? So we, just hit the next button, please. Hey, I'm Chris. I founded and run a company called Datalicious, and we're now part of the Equifax family. And you may also have noticed that Equifax is sponsoring the drink. So anybody who leaves early or asks any difficult questions will not get any drinks. The threat done with. What we actually do, Equifax launched a new business unit called Data-Driven Marketing, and they're broken up into four areas, which are sort of depicted here: link, reveal, engage, and measure. Linking your audience, revealing insights, engaging that audience, and then also measuring how that audience is performing, or your marketing activities are performing. And that last bottom bit, that's where Datalicious fits in. We've been doing that in Asia Pacific for the last 10 years, measurement in all its different forms, focusing mainly on attribution in the last few years, and are now bringing that to the US market, and hopefully I can give you some insights on how we approach that together as part of the Equifax family today.
So for myself, I'm retired right now, apparently. And so in my retirement, what I did was help Brian actually put together this last book. There's a lot of very good practical advice in the book. We're going to cover just a little bit of it for just a second, but I think you're going to really enjoy working on this. But I'm going to start out actually with, the thread of my life when I was a kid and everything else. And this was the moment at the end of the month and everything else. And I think, Peter, this represents your life right now. It hasn't changed actually very much. How many of you actually agree that this is really a true statement? At the last Tuesday of the month, you still need to move some more units, and you're posed, somebody's yelling at you going, make it happen. And I bet you I know what actually is going through your mind when that happens. You have a lot of questions in your mind. In fact, actually, your head gets polluted with all these little questions, and you get bogged down in the details. It's true. But the real question you want to know is the easy button. A long time ago, I came to a customer, and he said, Auto Trader is not working. And I came up and I said, it's not autopilot, it's Auto Trader. You have to invest in it too. So at the end of the day, I still actually want to answer that easy button. That's what we're all searching for, is where do you put an extra incremental dollar? But there's a lot of things getting in the way of that making happen, and we're starting to talk about that. You already know the customer journey is very, very complicated. It gets more complicated just the fact that we now have a big mobile audience to follow and everything else, but there's also a lot of different medias and channels that we're all chasing and tying together. And the part that we keep on forgetting about is, in these conversations, is it's not about just selling cars, it's actually about the full customer life cycle right there. That's a big part of it. It's actually, what do we do with that consumer, after they bought a car? And I tell you what, if you actually want to save money tomorrow, I bet you about 20%, 30% of your ad budget that goes into remarketing is somewhat wasted, because you're actually sending a message to somebody that just bought a car instead of actually sending them a loyalty remarketing message. And that's about to change. You're going to see that. The other thing is, it gets polluted. That customer journey is that we started to talk about that this morning, about proxies. We actually want to be marketing to people, but we put all this other stuff in the way about VDPs. And I got to tell you, first, about what we really want to be doing is measuring people, right? I started mentioning that this morning, that's That's really our goal. We start out actually looking at sales and leads, and then we cross that divide in digital, and we're no longer doing that. We're actually want to be looking at people. So I've actually been a little guilty over a few years. We want to, as a marketer, you actually want to be driving people from awareness to engagement to interactions that are meaningful, identifiable, and then correlate that to sales. And hopefully, there's some sort of correlation there. But unfortunately, that proxy, we're actually having to inject visitors and VDPs and everything else into the equation. And I got to tell you, I did a sin years ago. I walked into my former CEO's office one time. It was a Sunday afternoon. I said, "Chip, I got the new thing. We're going to push VDPs." And it worked actually fairly well for a little while. SAR was growing and everything else. You could actually start to see a correlation. The one guy that was listening in on that conversation and really got it right was Len Short when he started Lot Links. He did something really meaningful with VDPs. I liked what he's doing right there. So that worked for a while, didn't it? And then actually SARS flattened out. There's no correlation between VDPs and sales. I can tell you it doesn't work because they're polluted. But things have changed. When we first started doing this stuff, there was a little bit more correlation right there, but there's two main things that kind of get in the way of VDPs working. One of them is cross-device marketing and things. Over the last number of years, we already know mobile more than dominates desktop right now on all of our websites, and I bet you at cars.com and AutoTrader as well, like that, is dominating. People don't interact with mobile devices the same way that they do with desktop devices. So, in fact, actually, I remember having breakfast with Alex Vetter earlier this year, and he was saying, guess what? Actually, mobile traffic, they don't submit as many leads as they did on desktop. So how can you actually correlate, VDPs and things like that to meaningful sales information when all these devices just by itself actually create disharmony, in the results? The second one we wrote, Brian and I wrote at the very tail end of the book. So don't believe that just because it's at the end of the book, it was the least important type of topic. But we have a great section in there about actually talking about the performance of advertising as a function of distance from the store. Read it. It's a good chapter. Good, meaningful information out of it. I will leave you one thing, though. So I talked about proxies for a second. Proxies, they're just not people. Tomorrow, my good friend Kevin Lesage is giving a talk on engagement. And a lot of other people are starting to talk about engagement. Brian has a great engagement metric built into VistaDash. And there's others in our industry that are starting to head down that path. Guess what? There is a pretty good correlation. It's not great. It's still a proxy to sales. But it's something that next week, just read one part of the book. And you'll be able actually to practically take this part right here and do a better job with your advertising spend by just looking at engagement. Make that change. It's an easy one to start to go down. You don't even have to be perfect at it. But I can tell you actually that visitor counts, that's not a very good metric to follow. But you can see this real data right here that with engagement down below, it has a lot less dips and curves in it. Do you know what this that little dip right there in the middle is? That's Irma. And the sales totally dipped during that time period. And I was able to calculate the relationship between the engagement metrics I was doing to the sales data. And if you actually did engagement on a weekly basis and everything else, I don't even care if you do it right, but just do it better than just doing visitor counts. You're going to predict sales a lot more. You're going to be able to predict what's happening with your marketing budgets a lot more. And so the point is, clicks may actually, you're trying to drive more clicks in marketing. And maybe that translates into more people being targeted. And maybe that increases actually the number of sales that you have. But I guarantee you, without actually a disciplined approach of looking at things like what Christian's about to talk about, is unless you're actually measuring return on ad spend from meaningful traffic and everything else, chances are things may be pointing in the right direction, but your return on ad spend goes negative. And I really want you to do something more efficient with that. So I had a poll question, and maybe we missed the timing of getting it in, but if you could be 20% more efficient at your advertising, I'm just curious, actually, A or B or something, but would you, one, reinvest it, or actually would you pocket the change? This is a quick poll question right there. Sorry for not doing it electronically, but would you reinvest? Just do a shout out, reinvest or pocket it. So, good translation, take it away, change the industry.
Thanks, okay. No, I'll take it. That one. Okay, the pocket ones, you guys are way too careful. Reinvest, that's the way to go. There you go. Thanks, Tom, for setting up my presentation and talking about the many things that don't work. Like it's been really great working with Tom on this one. He's been in the industry for a very long time, and he's got a really thorough understanding of the things that don't work, and also has some really good strategies on how to make that better. And that's really how we started working together. So I just want to give you a bit of an insight into a few pilots that we've been running in the automotive space over the last 6 months, and that's really approaches and learnings that we've gained over those last few months. So the way, I guess, we approach solving a lot of these problems that Tom has talked about is what we call people-based measurement. People-based measurement and attribution. And for us, that breaks apart into two different problems. First, it's about building what we call the purchase path, and that's that red bit here. Creating a purchase path on an individual personal level, across devices, across time, that lists and that lists out all the different touch points that this person had, paid, organic, earned, owned. And then in the second step, once we have that path as exhaustive and as long as possible, we then need to figure out how to take the value that was generated at the end of it, whether that was the lead, the sale, the profit, the lifetime customer value. How do we distribute that? How do we decide what touch point gets how much of that credit, that sales credit that was generated? And that's called the purchase attribution. So the whole presentation today is really about those two different concepts and what we're doing here. And I've also got some interesting stats for you in there in terms of how to tie the offline sale of the car back to the online touch points, which is what you guys are all interested in. So the first thing that is super important with regards to the purchase path, and this is one thing that I think that will drive the efficiency of any sort of measurement provider that you're working with, is the ability to manage people IDs. People have many different IDs. They have IP address, they have a CRM ID, they have cookie IDs, 20, 30, 40 of those. Some of them persist, others vanish and change over time. Like if you want to be good at measurement, you have to be really good at the management of identifiers, personal identifiers. So you can take all these different disparate data sets and stitch them together into one purchase path. And that's where I think our marriage, Datalicious with Equifax, has been extremely enlightening for me. I come from a data desert, Australia and Asia. No data is available, and you guys are drowning in it in the US. So I'm like in a candy store over here. You know, all the stuff that's here is fantastic. You know. So first thing you need to crack is the measurement of IDs. The main thing that's used for, one of the key challenges to solve, is the fact that people have a purchase path that is usually confined to a device. So everybody here has got at least 2 devices, a laptop and a mobile phone. Probably, if you're a bit more fancy, you got a tablet as well, and then you probably got a media PC at home, and then maybe your daughter has a PC as well, and every now and then you use that because the other one's out of battery. So you have like more and more devices, and that number is increasing. And you have a purchase path on each of these devices. And especially with a mobile phone, it's a big problem because a lot of people do research on the mobile phone, and they may be even on the lot with the dealer, and they look up prices, and they check out the car trying to figure out some feature, but they never buy on that mobile phone. And so the ad that you serve on the mobile phone can never be tied to any meaningful engagement later down the track, and that makes the mobile ads look as much more ineffective than they actually are. So we've done a lot of research into that topic together with Facebook and Asia, and we figured that once you are able to combine these touch points across devices, so I'm able to identify people on both devices and I'm fusing that path together into one single cross-device path, you actually find that certain channels perform much, much better than you thought. So mobile is one of those. Like It drives actually twice the amount of conversions that you think. So that's one of the things we need to crack. And it's going to be it's going to be an increasing problem. So just a little bit of stats here on the number of internet-connected devices going through the roof. This is not a problem that's going to get less. This is a problem that's going to get worse, and it's going to get a lot worse, actually. So it needs to be a key part of your measurement challenge. The second thing, and you're probably going to like to hear that, who are the dealers in the room? Yes, you are still relevant. You wanted to hear that, right? And you are. I believe in that. You know, if you fork over 30 grand to buy a car, then you want to see that thing. You know, talk about digital retailing and all that stuff. If I buy something for 30 grand or more, I want to see that thing. I want to touch it. I want to sit in it, right? And so the dealer interaction, I think, is crucial in driving somebody to a sale, whether it's the advice or whether it's just looking at the merchandise on the lot and being able to touch it, yeah, without talking to someone. And it doesn't have to happen just before the purchase, before you shake hands and hand over the key. It can be at the very beginning, just to look at a few different models and then decide on the lot which one I want to research more, right? The point is it's important. And we really need to figure out how to capture that dealer interaction and inject it into that digital path. Like, when did it happen, okay? And so the main strategies for that really are basically buying data that you guys are all leaking. So who's here like a confessed online gamer, app gamer? Like, who here wastes time on mobile app games? Nobody? Really? Okay, this is pretty poor. You're like ruining my polling exercise here. I know that you're all doing it, okay? Whether it's in public or on the toilet, I know you're all doing it. And so every time you're on that Candy Crush thing, yeah, like somebody's tracking where you are. They probably can't tell that you're in the toilet, but when you actually walk into the dealer and you're on the lot, then they know that you've been there for a certain amount of time, or at least there's a high likelihood that they've been close. And so basically what happens is these apps sell that location data in the background. You can buy that, and as long as you have a matching identifier, I suddenly know that this person was on a lot, and I can start to inject that into the path with a timestamp and everything. So that's one of the approaches of dealing with that. And it's something that we definitely have to crack. I firmly believe retail will never go away, and it's always going to be very important. We're just going to figure out what's the purpose in the path, and I think that's going to change. Now, the other thing that's extremely important is what we call walled gardens. So people spend a tremendous amount of time in walled gardens, like Facebook is a walled garden, tons of time, right? And across multiple devices. And these walled gardens get a lot of our advertising money, but they also make it really hard to tracking people in these walled gardens. They want to hold on to that. They're trying to protect their audience. And so it's sometimes very hard for measurement providers like us to effectively track that and figure out what happened within Facebook, because they don't want that data to leak. And so this is not a static setup or environment. Like these gardens keep closing and opening. People change their policies. So Facebook and Google, until about a year ago, they made it really, really hard, and they didn't want to share their data. So about 18 months ago, that attitude started to change completely. They were starting to open up, and they're making really rich data available to independent third parties like Datalicious to basically use that information and give the advertiser more access to the raw data. And so that's great. We can take advantage of that, and I think that's where companies like Equifax and Datalicious come in as that sort of buffer between the advertiser and the walled garden. We can get that data and include it in the analysis. And there's other walled gardens that are closing, like the recent iOS Apple announcement with the tracking limitations, cross-domain tracking limitations that they implemented. That's massive. You know, everybody here's got an iPhone. I haven't seen a single person using an Android. So, okay, thanks. You were here to sort of back me up, not pull me up, right? And so that is massive. Like, that's going to be a huge impact on measurement in the United States, because what is like 40% of devices are Apple iOS, and that's going to be reduced. So what do you do with that? Google hasn't cracked it. If you read some of their latest blog posts, they're still like being wishy-washy about what they're going to do with it. The point is nobody has a solution for it, and you need to have a partner that is constantly researching these opening and closing gardens and how to deal with it, because this is like a moving beast. It's never going to be one solution. It's going to keep changing. Okay, so really, really important to keep an eye on that, and at least have strategies for it, or keep researching it, or work with a partner that you know is dealing with these issues. And so here's some of the big walled gardens in the US, like Facebook at the top. YouTube is another walled garden. A lot of people spend time on YouTube, but it's really hard to track impressions on that. Then we have things like Pinterest. I don't know how important that is for automotive, to be honest, but here's just a little bit of a list of where people spend their time. And it's really only Facebook that's opened up. All the others are still pretty closed, right? So what do we do with these guys? We need to start developing some strategies, and hopefully as an industry, we can start pressuring people like Snapchat and say, good, give up your data. Because you guys sit on a lot of advertising dollars, you can actually maybe pull that off. The next one is what we call interaction quality. So you have in this path many touch points that can be of very dubious quality, especially display advertising, okay? Display advertising, just because you buy an ad impression doesn't mean it wasn't blocked by the user because they're using an ad blocker. It doesn't mean that because you served that ad and you bought that ad, it was actually seen. So you maybe bought it at the bottom of the page because you're stingy. You don't want to fork out for the expensive CPM at the top of the page. So the ad was served, but the guy never scrolled to the bottom. He never saw the ad. Couldn't have any effect. And then a lot of ad fraud is going on. The digital marketing industry is basically set itself, it primed itself for ad fraud. Like the wider ecosystem is set up, it's almost inviting you to commit ad fraud, okay? So it's massive. I should be an ad fraud. There's a lot more money in it than what I'm doing right now. You think I'm joking, but I'm actually thinking about it. And so it's incredibly important when you do attribution and measurement is you need to have ways of identifying users that use ad blockers, users that identify and track ad viewability, and important to track ad fraud. And because a campaign, without looking at any of these factors, a campaign can look like it has 1,000% ROI. And once you filter out all these ad impressions that were blocked, not viewed, or fraudulent, the campaign drops below 0%, so it's negative ROI. It can have a massive impact on the results. You've got to deal with it, okay? And again, it's not getting worse. It's not getting easier as a problem. Ad blocking is still growing, and ad fraud is scheduled to go through the roof, actually. It's a problem that gets a lot worse. It's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. So again, something that we need to keep a close eye on it. It's going to become more prevalent. Yeah? And then finally, the biggest problem probably of this industry is you spend a lot of money online and you're investing a lot of time and effort into keeping your online presence and campaigns updated, but really the sale doesn't happen online. And you need to figure out, well, all this money that I invest online, is it actually driving some offline sales? And to be honest, like we didn't have to deal with this too much in Asia Pacific. In Australia, our client base was different. It was more like banks and telcos who actually sell stuff online. It was a lot easier because we could track everything through to the endpoint. But in automotive in the US, this is a bigger deal. So we invested a lot of time in these pilots over the last 6 months to figure this one out. And so what we do here in conjunction with Equifax is I'm going to tell you a little bit exactly how we stitch these things up. So on the right-hand side, we have the sale. We either get the sale directly from the dealer or the dealer management system, or we have access to third-party data sources that basically take registration data from the DMVs. We get that. All that data is usually the key data in there is PII. It's a name, address connected to some sort of VIN. I know that somebody registered a car. They must have purchased it at some point. We take that, we clean it, and we're really, really good at matching that. And basically, we anonymize that information, and at that point, it's matched to the Equifax consumer universe. So all of you guys are in some big universe, and we're able to use that information and match it to a household. Okay, that's the first interesting piece, because we can see what household bought that car, because there's probably a lot of people within that household researching or contributing to that purchase decision. So at that point, it's connected to an offline person ID and an offline household ID. It's all anonymized, but it's connected to that. Now we just got to figure out how we take that offline household ID and offline person ID and tie it to the online activity that's been going on. So the data that sits in the ad service and on the websites and the mobile apps. How do we do that? The first thing we do is we use something called deterministic identity matching, right? So we work with third-party matching partners, but the key term here is plural. We don't just use one. We're not locked into one matching partner ecosystem. We use multiple. Try the first. Does he have a match? No. Go to the second. Doesn't he have a match? Go to the third. We combine them all together, and by adding each one that we add, we get a little bit more of an incremental match. Okay? And once we run out of steam with this, we then move on to a probabilistic approach, as in using the IP address, and your IP address is usually connected to a zip +4, and so depending on how many people are in that zip +4, we can make a good or a bad probabilistic match. Okay? And that allows us then to tie these online identities to the household. And at that point, we know the various different people that are in a household, what are their online IDs, and how they all group up together into one household. So we can see all the different people in the type of research they've done leading up to a car sale. At the end, we take all that data, we take the advertising log files, the website log files, the car sale at the end, we stitch it all together into that magical purchase path across devices, and do our attribution modeling on top of that to figure out exactly what touch point was more powerful, more important in driving the final sale, so the marketer can then focus on that or redirect some budget into that.
Christian?
Yeah.
Can you give our group here a realistic, remember we asked the question this morning, what percentage of those sales you actually could match?
That was always timed too well, because it's coming up right now. I didn't set him up to ask that question, but yeah, I can. This is coming right here. So the first match, taking the sale and matching it to a household. Equifax is tremendously good at that. They've been working with addresses all their life. So we get a match rate of about 90 to 100%. If you have clean PII, if you had good PII data that's matched to a sale, I can tie 90 to 100% of those sales to an actual household. The number is probably around 95, 96%. Now, once I've done that, the other side of the equation, the left-hand side, that gets a little bit more tricky. But tying a actual household to an online identity, roughly around 50 to 60%. Yeah, that's the max that we've been able to achieve. Okay. Now, once you put those two together, theoretically, if you say 50% of 90%, the maximum match rate should be 45, right? But it unfortunately doesn't get quite that good. So the absolute maximum match rate that's realistic at the moment, from what we can tell, is in terms of matching an offline sale to an online identity, is around 25 to 35%. Okay. That is awesome. That is ridiculously awesome. Now, all you guys are sitting there, oh my God, it's only 25 to 35%. It's just like, you guys are killing me, okay? Now, and you should be like, yeah! So the reason why this is awesome is I'm going to introduce you to like a new concept now. You're going to learn something here, a statistical concept called margin of error, or the sample size, statistical validity, okay? Now, guess what? You don't need to match every single sale to get a statistical outcome. And hopefully, this is quite simple stuff. I hope it's not going over your head. The point is, I don't need to measure every single sale to come up and calculate a result with a high statistical accuracy. So for example, Gallup, the guys that survey Americans to predict the next more important outcome, like the guys that basically said that Hillary was going to win, but then the other guy did. So they survey 500 people a day. That's enough for them to make a pretty good, accurate prediction. It doesn't work all the time, but it usually works quite well, okay? And no, I'm probably stepping into it here right now. That's one of the topics I was told to stay away from, but hey, I'm Australian, I'm allowed to. So the next thing is a company called Pew Research. They do like surveys on, what's big in America and what are the trends and what do people think. And so for a nationally representative survey, they only survey about 1,500 people. Now, if I take that, and with that 1,500, what they get at the bottom, that number that you can see there, 3.4%, 2.4%, it means when they survey 1,500 people in a nation of 330 million or whatever it is, the result that comes out of that only has a variance of 2.4%. So they say, all of you guys are 90% likely to buy a car within the next year. That 90% will only be off by plus or minus 2%. So if they say 90%, it may be 92 or 88. And you guys, with a 25 to 35% match rate, if you apply that to the sale, whatever it is, 40 million car sales a year, 72 million new, that works out to be, 27 to 28K sample size per day. That is overkill. You don't need that many to get a really good statistical valid outcome with whatever reports you build. You do not need a 100% match rate. We at Equifax and Datalicious obviously strive to get to 100%, but rest assured, even while we're not there yet, the results that come out of these kind of analyses are very, very valid and very, very solid, okay? It's already overkill. So that's what we're trying to do, basically to give you a clear view of how many people did your advertising make aware of your product, of the car, how many of these people did you engage, how many of these people did you sell to, and it's always people figures, how many of these people did you service, and the numbers can be quite different to what you're used to seeing right now. It's roughly 40, 50% only of the visitor figures. So all of your reports are basically going to go like that. Yeah? You've got to explain these concepts when you do upward reporting, because all your numbers will look worse from one month to the next. Yeah? But hopefully when you do it, you're actually able to improve the magical return on ad spend. So we'll be able to show you, am I attracting more and more, am I making more and more people aware? Does that translate into more and more engaged people? Does that translate into more and more actual sold people without having to rely on any proxy metrics? And we can then also tell you, does the return on your ad spend actually go up or down? Okay? And that's the purchase path attribution part. I can see every single touch point that's leading up to a sale, and I know how much you're paying for that. I know there's $1 a click here, $10 a click there, And we know how much each of these touch points were worth. And we can then compare that against the actual investment, the money that you had to pay for it. And we can tell you, was it worth it or not? Should you invest more in that or should you cut the spend? That's the kind of decisions that we make. The way we do that is by building something called an attribution model. We have this path, and then we're using statistics to figure out exactly how much credit each of these touch points should get. There's a whole bunch of existing models, like the last click model, last touch model, where 100% goes to the last touch point. I think Brian did a really good job of slamming that one. That's definitely the worst. Got to move away from that. Then there's a whole bunch of other ones, like even attribution. Every touch point gets 25%. That's also rubbish. Like seeing an ad and clicking on an ad are totally different engagement levels, right? You just see something you don't care about, and you click something that you really like. Can't get the same credit. That's obvious, okay? And then there's some weird ones like U-shaped, banana or whatever. I don't know who came up with that. It's basically like going like this. Oh, I think that looks right. Absolute rubbish, yeah? The only thing that works, and we've done plenty of analysis on that, is this, you cannot fit your company, your competitive environment, your seasonality, your campaign mix. You cannot fit that into a predetermined model. You have to come up with your own custom model, okay? The way we do it is with an approach called HMM. And in case you can't tell yet, this is the sales spiel of the presentation. The way we do this is with the HMM approach, which is absolutely superior to any other approach out there. You can totally trust me on that. No, the reason why it actually is, but is it's a really smart way of doing this, because we can actually, after every touch point, we can tell whether this person was pushed along, closer to the sale, or was pushed back. So I can't just tell you whether you're doing a good job. I can also tell you the points where you're getting pushed back, where there's a potential barrier. Yeah? Plus, I can start not just reporting on how good were you in driving sales at the end. I can tell your brand manager that his awareness campaign was also very good at pushing people into the next stage. So there's something in it for everyone in that approach. And that makes it very different to the usual attribution modeling. All of this stuff sounds really, really complicated. And you're probably going like, please shut up, I want my drink. But it is worthwhile listening, because there's a lot of money in this. And do you know what? In Australia, we get paid for this, and the budgets are just comical compared to the money that you guys spend. And it was worthwhile doing in Australia with comical media spends. You guys have ginormous media spends. I love it over here. It's fantastic. Like, my job is selling this stuff gets so much easier. On average, what we find in the first year, Forrester's done a whole survey on it, and I know you won't believe Forrester as much as you believe me, but I can confirm it is about 10 to 30% of media spend that tends to be wasted. As in, you do this attribution properly in the first year, you find about 10 to 30% of your media investment is invested in things that never in a meaningful way contribute to a sale. So you can take those 10, 30% and turn them off, and you continue to sell exactly the same. All right? So currently, this is your ad investment and the sale that you generate, about 30% waste. You can take that and reinvest it, and then obviously through that, generate growth and incremental. And the bigger your media spend, the more I'd like to talk to you and sell you my services, but also the more the potential ROI and return on ad spend that you can get out of that. And look, we could only really scratch the surface on this topic here, but I don't actually get any revenue from this book, but maybe I should, Brian. But this is a great book to read and get a good education. Maybe not light reading before going to bed, but it's a good one to flick through. Thank you very much.
Christian, stay up there. Stay. Couple things that hit me during your presentation. I didn't hear about cable television and smart TVs. Set-top box data is available in some forms from Comcast is represented here, Spectrum Reach. Comcast knows the physical address, knows the IP address, knows some things about that household. How is your organization bringing in set-top box data, or is it still an area while you're here you can make a deal with Comcast and get this shit done?
I'd love to, yeah.
Okay.
No, it's incredibly interesting data, and for us, it's just like any other touch point. As long as I have an identifier that goes back to a household and I have time-stamped exposure information, we put it into the path like anything else, yeah. And if it's not digital, as in we can't tie it to an individual, we use something called media mix modeling to basically use a more standard approach to sort of figure out how exactly did a TV campaign or a print campaign drive some form of online interaction or sale.
We've also heard that smart TVs, with the right permission, right? If a consumer gives the cable company permission, would be able to tell if a specific ad was presented and watched, meaning the smart TVs can actually sense, was there a person in the room while that dealer ad? That seems like a huge way to bring back television or broadcast.
That's creepy even to me.
Yeah. So that's another, piece. So there's guys like Peter who got the most applause until you came up. So Peter, you've been dethroned. Didn't you sound like Arnold Schwarzenegger a few times? Did anybody was thinking that towards the end? Close my eyes.
Thank
Arnold,
you.
The governor of California is here. But here's the point. This is fascinating. With that 25 to 30% match rate, with the ability, some people in this room are spending $100 million a year on advertising. $100 million. By your estimates, saving them $20 to $30 million. Does Equifax have a product that a dealer group plugs into? Is it a retail product? Is it a project? Is it a custom consultancy? How does Equifax plan to support the Cox ecosystem, the CDK ecosystem? There's so many different things. My question is, holy shit, this is really good. How does it plug in to OEM programs? How does it plug into agencies? Where were you? Oh, well, there we go. A little teaser from James Grace.
I'm gonna record that actually. That's gonna be important, I think. No, it's a good question. And yes, there is a product, but don't think about it as a plug and play and like turn the key and off you go. It's a little bit more complicated. Attribution is not a plug and play thing where you just buy it and run off with it into the sunset and it's going to be amazing. There's a lot of work involved and a lot of customization required. There's a lot of back and forth. Our analysts need to understand you, and it's an ongoing cultural change project almost, okay? We've done our best in productizing all the different components that go into it, but it is a consulting heavy piece. So think about it as a consulting project, as a partnership that will last several years, but we've done our best to productize as much of it as possible to get able to start quickly and to reduce costs, yeah? But it's incredibly flexible and customizable.
Great. Questions from the audience for Christian? We have a microphone, Zane. Grab it. Any questions from the audience? Oh, here we go. Oh, there we go. Peter, he's got it. He got to step up here. Come on.
Peter, is that you? I want to talk to you later. I apologize. I'll give you a free drink.
So it won't be hard. I'm kind of more
be kind.
curious.
Okay.
So you found a way to put like all the stuff I was thinking somehow on a PowerPoint slide. So I guess I'm more intrigued by.
Was that like a boy crush that you just admitted
I don't know.
to here?
Maybe it's the accent. I'm not sure.
Okay.
The match rate at the beginning, right? Going backwards. I understand at the beginning why we can't get those IDs. So I'm kind of more in, I guess, is there such thing as a persistent ID across all IDs that we could unify to create? One. And two, I guess over time, wouldn't that percentage of attribution at the beginning, the 35%, increase as we learn and learn more and retain their IDs? So for instance, the new iPhone just came out. All your device IDs should be messed up for at least 3 months, right? In theory. Yeah. Now, over time, you get better and better. If I'm grabbing all this data, which I don't even know if Equifax is going to let me store at my local dealership, but if they did, wouldn't I next year and the next 3-year lease term be at 60% 3 years from now because now I have their device information, their household information, their Wi-Fi information, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I totally expect that to be the case, but I don't think, while there's a lot of things that will make the match rate better over time, like more data available and better tracking mechanisms, there's also a lot of factors that make these identifiers extremely fleeting and will make these things worse, like the thing that happened with Apple, right? So I would expect it to be a bit like this, Maybe we have a good year this year, next year it's going to be a bit worse, and next year afterwards it's going to be a bit better. So I think it's definitely going to increase. It's not going to increase as fast as you want it. I can't see this being at 60% next year, maybe in 5 years' time, yeah?
Are these IDs, they're obviously generated by each individual walled garden, right?
Yeah.
Do you find it hard to get access to these IDs and to keep them and retain them?
Yeah.
Can you grow with these IDs and kind of add ID to ID to ID with commas or whatever, however they function, right? In theory.
I think we've got to be really careful as an industry, and this is obviously a little bit of self-advertising and sort of justifying my own position, right? But we, as marketers, we seem to have this sort of, I want this data, I want it in-house, I want to own it, I want to have this ID, and then I'm going to target these people, and I'm going to send them in an ad, write them, and so we got to be really careful with that, because if we keep trying to own everything and bring all of this in-house, people are going to start putting up walls and say, I want to protect consumer privacy, and rightfully so, right? Because we just want it all, but usually we don't actually have any idea of how we're going to create some value back to the customer with that, right? So we got to find a way of, I think it's important that you have companies like Equifax and Datalicious who sort of sit in between as an independent third party, where somebody like Facebook or Google feels it's okay to share that data with them, but it doesn't end up with the end advertiser. Like, it's important to create some sort of ecosystem where you don't get the data, but you do get the insights, if that makes sense. And I think that's the only way to create something that will last for longer and won't get shut down by whatever.
Christian, one of the things that you showed in the walled gardens, and you and I had conversations, but they may have been off the record. So the question is you showed this safe zone, like a safe zone where Facebook might share to a data hub or Google might share to a data hub today. Are there some advertisers that can, through an anonymous data hub, connect Facebook activities with Google activities to create that shopper path, because there's a safe haven that Google trusts and Facebook trusts, and there's some crunching going on in the safe data warehouse to give an advertiser end-to-end.
That's one of those questions you don't ask publicly. I don't know.
Okay,